Hey everybody, it's Tom Cherryums with the FujiNet project, and I wanted to show you something I've been working on for the last day or so, essentially patching and putting together the first publicly released version of FoReM for the Atari 8-bit machines. This is a BBS that was originally derived from Amos source code to extend it to basically allow for up to 26 possible message areas, thus the version number being 26M. This was essentially written by Matt Singer, who also in tandem with FoReM would also extend Jim Steinbrecker's A-Modem program to become A-Modem Plus, improving it and working along so that it worked really well hand in hand with FoReM. I'm actually going to show essentially what we did here. First, we'll just run through the process of booting the FoReM image that will be available shortly, setting up the BBS and accepting a call, showing how it works, etc. Then I'll take and go in more detail. I do apologize if I seem a bit less energetic than usual. I just spent the last 2 hours on a user group meeting demonstrating FujiNet here, so my apologies. We'll start by going to my Raspberry Pi here, which has, among other things, the disk images that I'm using here for FoReM. I'm going to take and put them into drive 1 and drive 2 respectively. Go here into my BBS folder, go into FoReM-850, 250M, and we'll put the disk for drive 1 into drive 1, mount it read-write because we do need to write certain files to it, and I have a certain, another disk image here that I'm using as a sort of file section. That goes into drive 2. And I've modified FoReM to this version of FoReM here for my own installation to look for files on drive 2 for the file section. With that, we can take and boot into it. Now, you'll see that we've added a little bit of basic code here to send commands to the FujiNet to set a listening port for port 6502 and to turn auto answer on. I'll go into more detail on those programs in just a moment, but for right now, we'll go into the BBS file initializer. And we will initialize the BBS. Yes, let's go ahead and continue. It will clear the space and initialize appropriately. Go ahead and initialize the password file, yes. Set up for however many passwords. We'll go ahead and just say for 255 possible passwords, and we'll set up for 2 conferences. The name of conference 1 we'll set as Atari 8-bit. Yep. And we'll say that we're going to use a grand total of, let's say, 200 sectors for Atari 8-bit. It will take and create the file here. Now what it's actually doing here, since this is derived from Amos, it is actually taking and clearing out a random access file and creating the index along with it. This type of method of database access is actually called ISAM. So we'll go ahead and make another forum here for, I don't know, general discussion? No, it's not correct. So I'll just call it general, sure. Number of sectors, again, let's say 200 sectors here. No problem. Now we've created the message boards and the password file. The general configuration file will also be updated as needed. Now, in order for this to actually work, I actually had to go in and reconstruct the BBS disk from the archive that was present on software.bbsdocumentary.com, because the files were named incorrectly, and I had to take and piece all of this back together based on what the BBS code wanted. We go ahead, since the BBS program disk and data disk are the same, we press Enter. This gets reset, and with that, actually, I'm going to go ahead and we will just take and reset the FujiNet and reboot, just to make sure that everything is nice and neat, because the initialization process isn't 100% yet. So as I'm going to state, anybody who can help with trying to make this better, I would really appreciate the help here. We'll go ahead and reboot here, no problem. Give it a few moments for this to come up. Listening on port 6502, auto answer is enabled, and with that, you should be able to log into the board. We'll go ahead and insert a data disk, hit return, which it's already there, so we just hit return. Go ahead and enter the date, which is 02/20, should be 02/2021. What time is it? It is now 13:49, so 13:50. And FoReM will initialize everything. And it's literally taking and building up the status bar one byte at a time here. Then it goes through and purges dynamically the initialization parts of the program that are no longer needed when the program is running. And with that, we are now waiting for a connection. Now it's waiting for a connection here in a very unusual way. I think that Matt Singer originally wanted this to work with as many different modems as possible, which meant that he's not relying on Hayes result codes, which were not in common usage just yet. Instead, he's waiting on the DTR and the DSR and the carrier detect signals to assert themselves in tandem to indicate that a connection has happened. I've made the appropriate adjustments to the firmware, and those will be available in the next build. So with that, we'll go ahead and go over to our other screen here, where a modem has been waiting patiently for me to use it. And we shall go ahead. Yep, okay, fine. We'll go ahead and dial in. Since I have my FujiNet waiting on port 6502, we will dial in on port 6502. And within a few moments, we see that the connection starts. And we have our Atari system notification here, and the status bar will fill up appropriately. Now, because there are no users in the system yet, we need to actually make one. So we'll go ahead and go through the process as if we are signing up to be a user. We have no system ID, so we go help. And enter our first name. And our second and our last name. And a phone number that we will use for verification. No, that is not my real phone number. Okay, so a 4-letter password. This is actually used as the system identifier. We'll see how to use it in just a moment. Is this correct? Yes. And at which point, we get caller number 1, time limit on this call, boom. Now at this point, we have the menu. Now I'm actually going to follow the documentation. The documentation that's on this disk actually says to do this. we can either log off and validate the user using validate, or we can go straight to 90 to actually take and do a user level verification. Does it go to 90? New level. At which point we say level 25, which is the level reserved for sysop. And with that, that is saved. And if we take and goodbye at this point, we'll go ahead and actually, since we have the new level here, we can do some other things. We can look at the different menu options. Again, the menu files need to be adjusted because there are more options here in this menu than there actually are in the menu text file. Things that need to be things that need to do. We'll go ahead and enter a test message. Send to everybody, sure. If you wanted to send to a specific person, of course you could. Let's not leave it anonymously. I want my name there. We'll go ahead /s to save. And just like that, everything good. Okay, we'll go ahead and goodbye. Or actually, we'll do one more thing. Let's look at the file area. And let's look at some games here. Some games that you might find on a typical Atari BBS here. Alpha Shield looks nice. Let's try to download that. So we have the opportunity. It says there's 32 sectors long. You want to use X modem protocol? Sure. At this point, we'll take and receive the file. Yes, go ahead. And in a few moments, we will say load as X modem, start to begin the file transfer. And here we go. We are now transferring the file over X modem to the target machine. And as you can see, it's working very well here. The access level hasn't been updated in the status display, but that's fine. As a matter of fact, we can basically take the access level will be updated whenever I log off, because it will save the password and use what's actually in memory here. Again, we could have used the validate tool to actually do this. Almost done here with this file. And it's very nice actually seeing all of this come to life again. For the first time in like 35 years, I'm really very happy that this came together. And we'll see some of the things that I had to do to make this work. So now we're at the last block here, saving everything, and with that we're done. Boom. And we'll go ahead and just log off. Yes, well sure. We'll save the password for future use, with which case it takes and files into the password file. And we're done. Just like that. So there we go. We see a FoReM-850 implementation working. Now with that, there are still some weird little bugs. As you'll see right here, I will take and dial in again. And for some reason, the status is not the same the second time around. It will fail. But if I dial again, we'll see that it works just fine. Very strange. Since I have my user in here, I'll just go ahead and put it in. And we use the phone number that I put in here as verification. At this point, access level 25, everything into place, and we're here as we were before. So there we go. As we can see, just working. So we now have here a ready-to-go version of FoReM-850, as it was back in the day, ready to use for people who want to use it. We just need to take and fiddle with it a bit more to make the experience even better. Now the rest of this video is actually going to detail some of the changes that I made to actually make this work. And this is important as we take and adapt other boards to use to do this. I'll go ahead and press start, which closes off all the files and puts us back at a ready prompt. Now, because of how FoReM actually works and adjusts the display, it doesn't exactly put the display back into a normal mode. And you can't just rerun the BBS from this point here because all of the initialization code has actually been removed from memory by the initialization code. It pretty much, it uses itself and then eats itself. Kind of interesting, which is why you don't want to make modifications to the board and then save them back out in this state. So in order for us to really do anything interesting, we're actually going to have to reboot ever so slightly here. I will take and do a cold start. And we will go back to our single pane display here. You'll see this program right here. This is the new start that listens on port 6502 and then boom, done. We'll see how that actually works out. So for this, let's first take a look at the disk structure here. We'll go out into DOS. The version of DOS, the FMS that's being used here is MyDOS 3.08, one of the earlier versions of MyDOS. And the reason that this one is actually being used is so that there actually is enough memory for FoReM to load. FoReM is a very large program. If we take a look at the size of FoReM here, it's 117 double density sectors long, so double that value. It's 200 and over 200 and some odd sectors right there. It easily takes and fills up the entire available memory space in BASIC, leaving approximately about 3.5K free if you use MyDOS. So the version of DOS that you use here is important. And in point of fact, if you actually take a look at the documentation that is present, let me take a look here. It's what did I FoReM doc. Here we go. You'll see the required documentation that you need to rename the files to what you need to rename them to reconstruct the disk. And there is also FoReM2 doc, which is also important, which contains a number of notes that you need in order to run the board. Rename the autorun file to autorun.sys, and there's a note here in the middle of the screen specifically saying that you cannot use Atari DOS 2.0S or 2.0D, let alone OSA+. It must be run under MyDOS 3.05, 3.07, or 3.08. It won't even run under version 3.14. So, very careful. Follow the notes so that you understand how this works. Good things to start. You'll see here that I've renamed all the files appropriately. All the utility files are exactly where they need to be. And the initialization process has created a number of message-based files as well as DAT files. Now, if we actually go ahead and go and look at the new start program that I wrote here, the autorun that is actually provides a custom routine to update the real-time clock. So it's a good idea to actually use it. It provides the real-time clock, it initializes the 850 handler, and does the bootstrap, and then loads start. So you have to use that. Well, this causes a number of issues because we need to be able to do things like rlisten to specify a listening port, and we need to be able to run the rAutoAnswer tool to automatically set the auto answer mode to enabled. Now, while we could actually take and put these things in the web admin to automatically be done, that hasn't been done yet. So I had to come up with something that could be done here, even in the face of this custom handler. And the way I chose to handle this problem was with a custom start program. And you'll see right here that essentially what we're doing is making our own custom SIO calls. The first set sets the listening port. That's lines 10 through 60. Then lines 70 through 110 set up the auto answer. So each one of these custom sets the DCB, calls SIOV, and checks the return to see whether or not we say there was an error doing that or it happened. If it's a 1, then it was successful. I did have code down here at the bottom to do a baud lock at 9600 baud, but that turned out to be unnecessary. Or yeah, 1200. That actually turned out to be unnecessary, and the fix had to be done inside FoReM itself. Nothing has been changed in the start program, in the original start program. And in fact, if you look at the original start program, you'll actually see that there's not much going on. We open and close to make sure that the handler is loading correctly, and then we have jump-off points to load the various BBS utilities. Unlike later versions of FoReM, there are no initialization routines happening at this point. So that gets us to FoReM-26M.2, the BBS itself. The only other place where I had to make changes. And in reality, there wasn't that much that needed to be changed. The only things that needed to be changed were during the call routine itself. And in fact, the only things that we really had to worry about were here and here. Initially, this particular routine was checking, would do go sub ch, which would get a character from the serial port, and based on what was returned, what sort of character was returned, it would try to determine the baud rate from the carriage returns that were sent back, if they were garbled in a certain way or not. This was basically changed so that we assume that there is always a carriage return that sends back, so that this routine will just go through as expected. And we hard set the baud rate to 14, which corresponds to 9600 baud. And we automatically say, okay, well, that baud rate's connected at 9600 baud. And we keep it like this. The interesting thing about FoReM-850, again, you will not find a single line of code to send commands to the modem to initialize it. And in fact, it relies entirely on sensing the CRX and DSR lines to indicate whether a carrier happens or not. So with this one change here, I was able to basically get a working FoReM-850 installation, compounded with the little bit of extra basic code that I wrote to set a listening port. Now, the only other change that I did for my specific installation was to change right here at this line where the files were actually being stored and searched from. That's it. Interestingly enough, if we actually take a look at what's on drive 2 here, I keep wanting to use it as MyDOS4. My bad. You'll see that we have each file here, but we have an unusual set of file extensions here. FoReM-850, like BBS Express version 1 and some other boards for the Atari, use the extension to categorize the different files. In this case, the first character is the file type. The second character is the language or categorization type. And the third character is the security level type. Security level, there are 26 possible security levels from 0 to 25. And so if I wanted certain files to only be visible to the sysop, then I would take and rename the last character of one of these files to Z, and so on. And that's really it. I mean, with this, I was able to take and produce something that was able to come up very quickly. And again, it's important really to understand that as you start to look through these boards, it's a very good thing to go ahead and make changes and tweaks as you need to suit your needs. And it's very thankful that you can literally do this to print out a copy of the source code so that you can see it on your printer. Give it a few moments. And just like that, you have a printable copy that you can pick up in the FujiNet web admin to reference. Especially important because the PDF file that you get can be searched for keywords to help you comb through code much faster. So with that, I will take and leave this video where it is. Just wanted to show that this worked and give kind of a little bit of insight into what I did to get this to work. There were some small changes that needed to be done on the firmware side. But as we bring more of these boards up and running, this will be needed less and less. So what I'm asking for from every community member that wants to run one of these boards, to try to run it, bang on it, engage with the community to try and make these things work. And with luck, what we will wind up with is a set of well-curated disk images that any user can run to run a BBS of any given type. It doesn't matter. BBS Express, FoReM, Amos, whatever, on FujiNet, if they want to. So, until next time, guys, have fun.